All right. I think I technically went live at 7:33 like I had planned. Um, I don't know. I'm still a little bit behind. I want to make sure I've got my audio good to go. So if you can hear me, let me know. And then we're going to start talking about Hermes. Why Hermes? What's going on with Hermes? Let me see here. And if you can hear me, sorry about that. All right. So, also, like, where's all this coming from? Okay. I think we're good. Got the audio. We're actually publicly live streaming. We're not making that mistake. Okay. We're working out the kinks. We're feeling good. I'm going to get this up. I think I can see chat. So if you're with me, let me know you're here. Let me know how you're feeling. Firsties for Hermes. Nice. Glad you're with me. Glad you're here. This will be an interesting one. Yeah. And I think, thank you. Okay, awesome. Good. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, and there is a little bit of a delay, so bear with me as if you type something in the chat, if I've moved on or something like that. But yeah, this one will be interesting. Here's the other thing I wanted to do. Just bear with me. I wanted to see if my brother was available. So I was sending him a link because this one might be interesting for him. It's interesting that the crazy thing about the crazy thing about this is that I don't think Joe Rogan has any. He's not connected to John Vervaeke. Like through Jordan Peterson, yeah. But does Joe Rogan listen to John Vervaeke? And not even really that. Does Cat Williams listen to John Vervaeke? So you could think that it would make sense if Cat was listening to John Vervaeke. He goes on Joe Rogan's. He's got Hermes on the mind. But the context was so different in the two conversations. So basically what happened is John Vervaeke was talking to Jordan Peterson. When was this? This was a couple weeks ago. Actually, I had it up here in just and then seemingly like unrelated to that. So the Joe Cat episode was February 29th. At least that's when they released it. So you can think about when they recorded it. I don't really know. And then the Jordan Peterson Vervaeke episode was 2 weeks later. No, was it before? Let's make sure. Where was that? Okay, so it was actually 1 month ago. So what does that mean? Somebody that can do math. February 29th was like 6 days ago. Oh, this is so bad. Anyway, they're unrelated. That's my point. I don't know. So, okay, but the point is Jordan Peterson and John Vervaeke were talking about it prior to Cat Williams and Joe Rogan. So you could think that maybe one of them was listening to John Vervaeke, but I don't think so. These two conversations were detached from one another. And so then the question becomes why? Right? Why did these two seemingly unrelated conversations take place 2 weeks apart from each other, very different people? I mean, you can see that Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson have a connection. Okay, Jordan Peterson has been on Joe Rogan; they've got a connection. But Cat Williams and John Vervaeke, no. No, I'm thinking there's not really a connection there, and yet it was Vervaeke, not Jordan Peterson, who brought up Hermes, and it was Cat Williams, not Joe Rogan, who brought up Hermes. So, And of course, it spilled around this little corner and Paul Vanderklay and all that stuff. Um, and you could look at it and say that, Paul took up on it because Vervaeke was talking about it. And then it kind of spilled around Paul in this little corner. And that is a result of John Vervaeke. But then for Kat to bring it up on Joe Rogan just seems so out of the blue. And really, really, the thing for me that is even more out of the blue, you want to make another connection. I was reading about this prior to the Jordan Peterson, John Vervaeke episode, because I was reading about it from Martin Shaw. Now, that was, gosh, when was that? I mean, it was definitely prior to me listening to the Vervaeke episode. Martin Shaw on storytelling points out that Hermes is a really particular figure. And if you want to use the term God or spirit or demigod or whatever, and you could even talk about this in the realm of ideas. You could say that the ideas that are being passed around in the internet are powerful. They inform people. They shape the way they think. And then having shaped the way they think, people go out and live these things out. And if you're more comfortable talking about it in the realm of ideas, I think that makes sense. I think that ideas are certainly there, but maybe the risk then in the realm of ideas is to not be aware of the world that we live in, which is a spiritual world, which is a supernatural world. Interestingly enough, maybe this is a little bit of a side tangent, but I was doing some research on Hermes, and I was using Logos Bible software, and I just went to go pull up Logos because that's usually where I usually pull up my Bible verses from there. and apparently I don't have an account with Logos anymore. So after doing some research on Hermes and the connection between Hermes and John's use of the Logos in his gospel, I went to log back into Logos, the Bible software that I use. And I was logged out, so I punch in my code, and they say, yeah, wrong code. And I go, okay, recover password. Give us your email address. Here's my email address. They're saying, well, we don't have an account with that email address. So that's a side tangent to this whole conversation. I don't know what that is. That's more than an idea. Maybe it's just circumstances. But certainly ideas are powerful. And I think about Ephesians 6. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against, and this is why I would need to pull it up in the Bible, because I do a really bad job of remembering these things. But essentially, the powers and principalities and world forces. So they're both. And if we just talk about this in the realm of ideas, then we run the risk of missing the sort of deeper spiritual conflict that is going on. What's up, brother? My brother is in the house. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good to see you, man. Good to see you. I don't know how much time you have, but it's good to hang out for a little bit. Talking Hermes. And so there you are, after doing the research. Somehow, now I have to figure out how to recover my Logos account. So, irony of ironies, is that just a circumstance? I don't know. But then, so then other people would be more comfortable talking about the fact that, is Hermes just an idea? Do we use Hermes as an example? He's the messenger God. He's, I think you could, but is there a sense at which, and I'll scroll down here. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but we'll go down to Paul's. He's got a nice little quote on this, that there are powers and principalities and that they essentially consume and feed off of our attention. Miss McGillicuddy in the house. Welcome, welcome. Good to see you. And so Hermes coming into the conversation seems more than an accident, right? Because we're in the realm of information today. We're in the realm of spreading and sharing information. And Hermes is the messenger of the gods. Divine revelation, we could talk about this in more sort of biblical Christian terminology. And then you have these sort of competing forces, maybe ideas, maybe principalities, whatever you want to call them, but there's divine revelation that does exist. And then there's other messages. And is Hermes bringing good or bad messages? Is it deception or is it truth? So what I pointed out in this Twitter thread is that we have to realize that Hermes is the messenger of the gods and a trickster. So how do you trust the message that's coming from the trickster? Well, Aaron jumped on this thread and gave us some bangers to look into, and I need to get the source here because I want to look into this more. But so I posted this. If you don't follow me on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, there it is. This is also going to help me sort of by way of giving you guys an outline, giving me an outline to stay consistent with. But also, hopefully, this is a way I can share some of these clips without YouTube dinging my channel again. We'll see. We'll see if it works. And as Chad pointed out, I need some branding so that whenever I need to pause and take a breath and drink some water, I can give you some branding. Yeah, so Thoth. Yeah, we'll get into that. Hermes, Thoth. And I read this. If you followed this thread on Twitter, this the interpretation of the four Gospels by C.H. Dodd, very interesting stuff because he connects. He looks at the origins of Hermes, Thoth, Mercury. Right, that would be the sort of Roman conception of this this deity, this semi-divine, disembodied spirit of Nephilim, maybe. Or whatever, I don't know. Sorry. He goes into that. But he also sort of asks the question of why is John possibly gesturing to that in his gospel? So again, I'm sort of getting ahead of myself here. But yeah. Okay, and then this idea that, and that's perfect because then the question does become, is John in his gospel borrowing from pre-Christian paganism, or is it that pre-Christian paganism was somewhat aware of what God had already revealed? That's and I think, and Paul actually had a really good video recently. I pulled up his channel because I was trying to find this conversation that we had. We had it in the comment section of one of his videos, I thought. But this Erasmus and Luther video that Paul did, he spent some time kind of unpacking a source that really does deal with that. So anyway, glad you guys are here. This is fun. I love hanging out and doing live streams. So if you have a question, let me know. Yeah, I'll kind of comb through some of this material and then I'll catch up on the chat. So why are Joe Rogan and John Vervaeke talking about Hermes? I first started thinking about the myth of Hermes as it relates to the current world of information because of Martin Shaw's book Smoke Hole. And Shaw points out that Hermes is the messenger of the god, but that when the soul is not prepared, the message is not received. And this is where I want to do a little bit more. I think I can use, it was so good. I still have access to my Bible, at least from Logos. That's good. But if we go to Genesis chapter 1 or 2, we see an interesting thing. Let me see if I can pull this over here for you guys. Nope. I just lost it. We see that God gives a message to Adam, right? You guys know the story. Maybe you've read it. What's the story? God puts Adam in the middle of the garden. Oh, and I lost it again. I don't think I prayed before this live stream. That's what's happening. This is, if you guys ever remember, and I'm sorry, we're bouncing around, but If you remember iRobot, he talks about ghosts in the machines. That's what I think about when that happens. The Lord planted a garden toward the east of Eden, and there was, and he placed man, who he had formed. Okay, so in Eden, in the garden, in the middle of the garden, there's a tree. Adam's there. Eve has not been created yet. So God tells Adam, don't eat of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay. The Lord commanded the man, saying, from any tree in the garden you may eat freely, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for the day you eat of it you shall surely die. Very clear, very specific message. Okay. And you could think of this as a story. That's the story of the garden. That's the story of how you live in the garden. Eve had not been created yet. So that's the message God delivered to Adam. So again, Martin Shaw's point, where the soul has not been prepared, the message will not be received. So we have that story, God, Adam, but we have this story, Eve to the serpent. We're missing Adam's conversation with Eve. Eve was not created yet. So the indication there is Adam, as the steward of the garden, was meant to steward that message as well. The message that God had given him. God had given him the garden. He'd given him instructions. He creates Eve, but God doesn't pass on the story to Eve. Why? Because God has put Adam as the steward to steward that message, to cultivate that story, and to present it faithfully to Eve and to those who would come after. But when Eve tells the serpent the story, or when Eve passes on the message to the serpent, something got missed. Something was perverted or twisted or mashed up in the messaging. This is what she says. The woman said to the serpent, from the fruit of the tree of the garden we may eat, but from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God said, you shall not eat of it or touch it, or you will die. And Eve becomes vulnerable to the deception of the enemy. Why? Because the story, the message was mishandled, and therefore the soul was not prepared. So when Eve hears the deception, the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die. Doubt creeps in, and deception is allowed to creep in. So there's something to this messaging, the messenger and the messaging, and the preparation of the soul. I think, and I'll get to this. I think what God is bringing to the forefront of our mind is, in this age of information, in this age of spreading messages, is my soul prepared to receive the truth of God, to receive the good news? Or am I going here and there? You see, Hermes is very fast. He's the messenger of the God. He's also very fast. He's got wings, so we can deliver messages with all the speed of Hermes. But is our soul prepared? Or are we made vulnerable to deception because of this world of messages that we live in, where there's no cultivation of the soul? That's my question about this. So why are Joe Rogan and John Vervaeke talking about Hermes? Probably because somebody wants us to pay attention. So this is particularly important, where when the soul is not prepared, the message is not received. So there you have it, a conversation about the control of information on Joe Rogan's podcast. Let me see if I can play this clip without getting dinged. Goes into it. Now, I think they go into it a little bit more. This clip is, just 20 seconds long or something like that. So it's going to give you a little sense of it. But
it's a
Hermes,
compact and
Trismegistus.
A cryptic Hermetic text. It was highly regarded by Islamic and European alchemists as the foundation of their art. Though attributed to the legendary Hellenistic figure Hermes Trismegistus. How do you say it, bro?
Trismegistus.
Trismegistus.
Trismegistus, Trismegusta. It's 3 times great. Hermes 3 times great. If anybody knows, you know what? I wanted to look up the reason for that. So they go into that. Now, again, are we, digital pirates making connections where, there's not connections to be made? I don't know. But it is interesting that it comes up in a conversation about the management of messaging, the management of messages. Is there misinformation, disinformation going on? Certainly there is. It's always been going on. Now, is it much faster and maybe hard to sort through, sift through, discern your way through, navigate through these things? Yeah, it's probably a little bit more tricky. Preparation of the soul. Yeah, and I need to do more research, and that's like I said, I was doing some research on Logos, kind of trying to do some more in this area, and things got kind of weird, but yeah. I'm reading up on your guys' comments here, so thanks for being here. Yeah, so that, and we do have to, if you want to go back, I did kind of a deep dive on the Nephilim question, because that's naturally where I go with this whole thing, with Hermes, and the question of the spirits and all that. It's ultimately, takes me back to the biblical narrative. Where is that video? And so what are these sort of spiritual forces that we're in combat to, or not where there's this wrestling with these spiritual forces? Are they, demonic, fallen angels? Is it, disembodied spirits of the Nephilim? Which one was it? Yeah, okay, giants from Genesis to Revelation. Thank you. That's the one that I'm thinking of. Let me see. I'll show that to you guys. It was this one. It was a couple months ago. Michael Heiser talks about this a lot. I know you guys are probably sick and tired of hearing me talking about Heiser, but I'll keep talking about Heiser because I think he's great. And is that just part of it? Because in that video, we talk about sort of the pantheon of gods. These stories are more than just myths, fairy tales, in the way the modern mind wants to dismiss them, as though they don't have any truth. It's like, oh, well, maybe there's a moral to the story. It's like, well, there's also something more foundational to that story. Story has a way of revealing its truth slowly, and with more depth. And so, of course, the Bible writes, the revelation of Scripture is in the form of narrative. A lot of it is narrative. We could have another conversation about the different genre that we have in Scripture. But I mean, it's story. It's story because, God has a limited amount of space to reveal His wisdom and knowledge to finite minds, and story is a vessel, is a container that allows for that truth to percolate and ferment. And you kind of you read these stories throughout your whole lifetime, and you're like, wow, I never saw that before. It's like, that's really interesting. And so the story of the Nephilim is one of those. I think it's more foundational than a lot of people realize. Okay. Oh, the machine. Okay, so called the ghosts, based on the concept of ghosts in the machine. Okay, I'll have to check those things out. Okay. Okay, so Mostly Not Working is here, and I think you're going to help me, because there was a Paul Vanderklay. Do you remember this conversation that we had on Paul's stream? I think it was on Paul's channel. I couldn't find the video, so you might be able to help me find the video for that. Okay, so yeah, thank you for clarifying this. In order to get the facts straight, let's say, I want to say Vervaeke actually talked about Hermes on one of the the After Socrates episodes that started in January 2023. And I don't think many people caught it. Okay. And yeah, and actually when I was looking at it, I think maybe he even brought it up with Jordan Peterson prior to this one. So it has been in conversation for a little while. And so again, why would Cat Williams bring it up on Joe Rogan? I don't know. I think connecting the dots between Martin Shaw, his book Smoke Holes, the Vervaeke conversation with Jordan Peterson, I can see the flow there. I can see how those might be connected. But this one with Joe Rogan just seemed like it came out of the blue. So we can listen to. Okay, nice. So I love it. I love that. Okay, so the chat it's the hive mind, man. I just love this. You guys are giving. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, there it is. You guys are great. So After Socrates, episode number 8. Man, okay. So let's listen to this really quick. This is Vervaeke, and for those who've listened to it before, you know, it's a refresher.
So I was in the middle of one of these sessions, and an archetypal presence came in and pushed aside all the parts and said, "No, you're going to listen to me." And who are you? And I said, "I'm Hermes,
Oh, yeah.
the god of interpretation, the god of meaning making."
Did he have little winged slippers on him a little bit?
Well, no, he
Messenger of the gods.
he appeared. He very much had a presence of a psychopomp. So I was in the middle of one of these.
Yeah. So Hermes, messenger of the gods, interpretation, meaning making, but again, the trickster. Bit of a trickster. And so here was my question for context. Is it something that the internet algorithm has brought about? Certainly some of that is happening because Paul Vanderklay, people in TLC, hear John Vervaeke talking about Hermes. Paul does a video of it. Then we talk about it on a live stream and it starts to spread that way. So that's a normal sort of algorithm sort of phenomenon, right? But that doesn't account for Martin Shaw's book and it doesn't account for the Joe Rogan interview. So I was thinking about it, and I think this is a C.S. Lewis illustration, but you know, when you're looking through a window pane and you see a smudge on the window pane, and then your attention is shifted, and suddenly now you see not just that smudge, but all the smudges on the window pane. And is it like that? Is the conversation around Hermes percolating because we've started to pay attention to Hermes and started to turn our attention to what did he call it? What did John Vervaeke call it? An archetypal presence. And we've started to tune our attention to this sort of archetypal presence. And Paul, from a while ago, and I do have to shout out Mostly Not Working, because I think you're the first one to clue me on to Paul's whole thing about the egregore. And then I did a deep dive into that. But when our attention, and this is C.S. Lewis from Screwtape Letters as well, but is our attention food for these spirits, these entities, these principalities, if you will? And you could think about it also in the realm of ideas. Ideas tend to spread like this as well. Is this why Hermes can appear in two seemingly disconnected conversations? Jordan Peterson, John Vervaeke, Joe Rogan, and Cat. Why? Because people have attuned their attention to this idea, this spirit, this principality, and it grows, right? But what of God? What of Yahweh? We do not feed him with our attention. Our attention to him feeds us. And is that the preparation of the soul that we need? That was an interesting question. Actually came up in a small group conversation for me. Do we this is what's happening on the internet. This viral content. It takes on a life of its own. Why? Because people attend to it. They put their attention on it, and it is growing and feeding. All right. I don't know if you're saying goodbye, mostly not working, but if you are, see ya. It's growing because it's being fed. It's being fed by our attention. But Yahweh's infinite. The Spirit of God is infinite. The Spirit of God doesn't need our attention. And so when we turn our attention off of these spirits, let's say, and turn our attention to the Spirit of God, it's actually we who find nourishment there. That's where we find nourishment. So here's Paul Vanderklay. This is classic Paul from, I don't know, a while ago. Sorry, I'm doinking around with my headphones here, but this is just classic Paul. This is where I knew I liked Paul Vanderklay.
Well, what if the spirits are vying for us? Now, to me, this brings up C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. Because what Lewis basically postulates is that, yeah, the spirits are vying for us. They want us for food. But the Father above wants us for sons who can participate.
God wants us for sons who can participate, children who can participate, because he loves us and knows that we're nourished by that. God, and so I come at this from a Trinitarian perspective. God doesn't need us because within the Godhead there is a unity of love, perpetual love, if you will, infinite love. And so God creates humanity, not because he needs humanity, but because he is the God of love. And to share that love is good. You know, we talk about the true and the good and the beautiful. That's good. That is the good, you know. And so the chief end for humanity is to glorify God, enjoy God, worship God. That's our purpose. And we find, it's like Augustine said, my heart is restless until it finds rest in thee. We find our rest, we find our peace, we find our joy when we attune our attention to our Creator. And that's where that discernment comes in. We live in a world of mixed messages. Some of these messages might lead us to God. They might lead us to the real person of Christ, or they might lead us away from the person of Christ. This was, I pointed this out. I don't want to leave this because, well, I thought that, let me do this. Let me find it, because I thought it was worth it. Whoops, daisies. That's not what I want. Hold on. Maybe I should. All right. I'm going to stop messing around with my stuff. That's not what I wanted. No, I completely lost that window. Okay. Anyway, that was fun. I pointed that out. Like, where was it? I'll try to just remember it. We have to be cautious about this. There's all this buzz around Joe Rogan sort of softening his take on Christianity. It's great. I celebrate it. I mean, because I really do enjoy the conversations on Joe Rogan. And I enjoy building on those conversations in something like this, where you and I can participate in this. But, you know, I was listening to the Joe Rogan, Aaron Rodgers conversation. It's like they get really close to talking about the actual person of Jesus. But not, he says we need some divine structure. That's what Joe says. And that's what takes them onto this conversation about the need for Jesus, which kind of like blew up the internet. and it's more than divine structure. It is divine structure. I mean, it's story is it's structure and atmosphere, and so yeah, do you need that divine structure? Yes, but the caution there is like, okay, we're not just talking about legalism now, we're talking about a person. So if that leads you to the person of Jesus, great. If it leads you near the person of Jesus but not quite, okay, this is what the Antichrist is. It's not the anti-non-Christ, as Francis Schaeffer points out. The Antichrist looks like Christ, but is not. So in a world of messages, and in a world of, where Hermes is the messenger of the gods and the trickster, we need that discernment. We really do. So just, again, love classic Paul, and this is part of maybe people waking up to the reality that the world is material and spiritual. There's mystery there. There's other, you can call them dimensions if you want to. I mean, that's one way that you can kind of conceive of it. You can even look back at sort of the sort of the medieval sort of hierarchy and all that stuff. So I think there's our modern concept of the world is certainly lacking in these areas. So we're sort of, as Paul also points out, modernity is sort of receding, and it's almost like the truth of the truth that God has revealed to us is solid, unmoving, and has not crumbled. Because God has the most accurate view of reality. like we're all messed up down here. God has it figured out because he created this thing. So who was it? It was R.C. Sproul. I think his definition of truth is awesome. He said truth is reality perceived by the mind of God. And so, again, this takes us back to Hermes. Is that divine revelation? That's what we need. But is that what Hermes truly delivers? So with that, I wish I'd read more of this book by C.H. Dodd on the connection between John's use of Logos and the tradition of Hermes, interpretation of the four Gospels. I left a link on X for anybody that wants to dive into that a little bit more. There is a preview on Google. It's not the full book. And so I may just have to get the book. It's an older book. It was written in the 50s. So I already like it because older books are better. But, interesting stuff. And I don't, and part of the reason I feel like I want to read more of his work is I'm not quite sure if what he's saying is that he believes the concept of the Logos in John's usage of it comes out of this tradition of Hermes, or if John is really pointing beyond that. He's using sort of familiar ideas for his audience, but is really pointing beyond this tradition of Hermes to the true word, the true messenger, the word that becomes flesh. It is the divine revelation embodied in the person of Jesus. And I think that's what he's saying, but because I'm not quite familiar with his work, I was sort of hesitant to sort of try to presume that I understand what he's saying. But it does seem that way. It seems, and again, Miss Evangelica, I think this goes back to one of your questions, which was, is the best explanation then that Christians are borrowing from this pagan tradition, or is it that the pagan tradition is actually sort of mismanaged a more foundational truth that has been revealed to us by God? And certainly as a sort of biblical Christian theist, it seems to me that every time somebody tries to convince me that the Bible was just this sort of creation borrowing from all these other pagan traditions, it's like, okay, I think one, there's a deeper understanding of Scripture that needs to be had, and this is part of the project that I want to do for the rest of the year, is explore the origins of the Bible, and I forget what my thought was there. So there's two things, and I only remember one, and that's always fun. Sort of the deeper tradition of what the Bible is, and even how, I guess what I was thinking was that, and I did point this out in one of my other podcasts, is once you understand what the Bible is, once you understand what you're dealing with, it's like the best explanation for the origin of the Bible is that it's a miracle. God created it's just a miracle. It's just a miracle. The materials will get me for that one, but it's like there's it's beyond our, let's say it like this. We can know enough about it to be satisfied, but we won't presume that we know everything about it. That's what I mean by a miracle, a mystery. I won't presume that I have it all figured out. I know enough. I see enough. But cool. All right. I'm following on chat. I'm following your chat. If you have a question for me, let me know. I'm glad you guys are figuring it out. Again, there's a little bit of a delay, so bear with me. Okay. Anyway, it was good stuff. Good stuff. Basically, there's not nothing there. There is some sort of connection. And I think John, in a way, is pointing to something greater than Hermes. He's not necessarily borrowing from Hermes and trying to just adapt that. He's saying, you guys kind of understand something, but let me show you it. Let me show you this one little thing that you understand in its fullness, the embodied word, the logos, the word made flesh, similar to what Paul is doing at the Areopagus. You worship the unknown God. Let me reveal to you what you worship in secret. Let me sort of reveal to you. And so, okay, we've talked about this. Hermes is the messenger, but also a trickster. And how would we know that the message that we're receiving was the truth? And that's the preparation of the soul that needs to be had. So something greater than Hermes is needed. And so maybe people like Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, as examples, are interested in Christianity and spirituality as the sort of promises of naturalism fail us. What was I saying here? Modern naturalism fail us. These ancient truths of Scripture emerge, revealing that they remain intact. This is Paul Vanderklay's illustration of Mono Lake. As Mono Lake recedes, the tufa that are under the water are revealed. They were always there. I think that's a really good analogy, because the water is shifting and moving, and that's the information that we interact with on the internet. It's this moving, shifting thing. You can glean some good stuff out of it. You could really find yourself down a deep, dark rabbit hole. But the foundational truths that have always been there, that haven't crumbled. And I actually thought that this, I wonder how this will work, if I can go back to that. But Justin had a great post. If you guys follow Justin on his YouTube, it's Justin's Morning Coffee. He deals with story. He deals with even modern story, like cinema. That's kind of his shtick. But I thought he had a banger of a post here. For the sake of argument, let's say one ancient culture has a principality over it, and that's kind of what we're talking about. I'm sort of being fuzzy with my language, but principality, spirit, idea. You can, of course, talk about it like an egregore. We talked about that a little bit with, I need to get my screen figured out. That doesn't work. All right, sorry. You have to look at my big face. Epiphenomenon resulting in distributed cognition. That was sort of the Vervaeke thing. Vervaeke talking about Hermes, that goes out into TLC, and then we're all kind of talking about it too. Oh, boom, boom, boom. And you guys have done some of that already here. We're already getting some more stuff for the rabbit hole. More stuff for the rabbit hole? We're actually digging. I don't know what we're doing. We're following the rabbit. You can be edgy and thinking having top-down agency, an invisible agent that wants and desires and uses people to enact those desires. think about it however you like. So then let's say another one has a different principality over it. Now the two groups come into conflict. How do you know when the angel of group A has won over group B? DeYoung says, when the myths change. That's how you know who has won the war in heaven, so to speak. When the myth is alive, it is a meta-narrative in which people live. It's just how things are forever. When it dies, it becomes mythology. And you can go back and look at it like you would look at the Parthenon in Athens today, an ancient archaeological site. But it is not inhabited anymore. You still find the remains of it. Now, for me, this was key in the realm of ideas and when it comes to this conversation of Hermes, because ancient ideas, like ancient ruins, sort of may crumble. And the tufa of Mona Lake, the solid truth remains, but the crumbled lies of the enemy, let's say, or whoever loses this war in heaven, their ideas have crumbled. And then what do we see in modern day? We see those old ideas really recycled into new forms of the old ideas. So that's why the lies never change. It's always kind of the same lie, different package, same lie, different package. The package crumbles because it doesn't have the strength to endure. Schaeffer talks about the ever-increasing pressure of society, but the truth does. But the truth has the ability to endure through that. So I just thought that was key. And then I asked this question. If you guys have any questions for me, let me know. Are we experiencing something of a Praeparatio Evangelica, preparation of the gospel in modern ears? The reason I'm thinking about this, I actually misquoted this in a podcast coming up. So if anybody hears that podcast that I had with Lance, I was talking about the proto-evangelion, the first gospel, and I mixed it up with this. So there you go. The first gospel is the idea that, you can look back into the Old Testament and you can look at Genesis 3:15 and there's this promise, right? But there's also this Praeparatio Evangelica, is the preparation of the gospel. We don't need to use those fancy words and mispronounce them as I would. Is there a preparation going on for people to receive the good news in sort of a modern form? And then I thought that, now listen to that. And then Aaron shows it, and this is what I talk about. This is the, what we talk about, the collective consciousness, or distributed cognition. Posts all this fascinating stuff. Where was okay, I got to find his first post. I think it's this one. In the context of Young, can you guys even see that? I'm sorry. That's probably bad. Anyway, the trickster is treated as a precursor to the Savior because of their self-sacrifice in a motif of unconscious agony. The trickster eats his own intestines to become less riddled by lust and hunger. Once these organs of appetite are whittled away by, is this Young or own words, only out of disaster can the longing for a Savior arise. That is fascinating. I had not connected that to Hermes and the trickster idea. And the Praeparatio Evangelica, the preparation for the gospel, because people use that term to refer to what was happening in the Hellenistic world before Jesus came. There's all these themes that you can pick up in the pantheon of gods that once Christianity started presenting the good news, everybody's like, oh, I'm familiar with that. I understand that. That makes sense to me. Why? Because I've read the Bacchus. I understand the table and the bread and the sacrifice of the gods. Connecting the dots. Yes, we used to call these rabbits. Now we are kind of. It is sort of distributed cognition, isn't it? Because this, and you can look at this this post from Aaron. I want to find these references because this will help me. But the trickster being the preparation for the gospel idea is fascinating. Because going back to Hermes, the messenger of the gods, is also the trickster. Now I've lost my thread, but going all the way back. That's fascinating. It's fascinating. I think, excuse me for my burp. I think when I heard Vervaeke talk about Hermes after reading Martin Shaw's book Smoke Hole, because I was already prepared to hear this conversation about Hermes, because I was already thinking about Hermes, because I was reading Martin Shaw. Again, there's no algorithm that could have connected those dots for me. It was I want to say warning. That feels like the wrong word, but it's like the light is shining in an area that says, hey guys, pay attention to this. Pay attention to what's going on. I'm not going to say this because, you know, they were the second coming or whatever, but there's some preparation for people to hear the good news going on. I think that is a fair statement. That's why you have all these people coming out as Christian. Like even one of Vervaeke's recent videos with Jordan Hall. I mean, it sounded like he got real close to basically just saying, you know what, I think I kind of need Jesus. I don't know. You've got Joe Rogan saying, I need Jesus. You've got Jordan Hall, who I've just sort of recently discovered through the work of this little corner. Who else? I mean, Martin Shaw, even not as recent, but recently became Orthodox. Oh, and the other guy who deals with story, I'm gonna forget his name, but he's a Martin Shaw type. Anyway, he became a Christian. Like, why are all these people becoming Christians? What's happening? Like, and I wonder. I don't know. And this is another step. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I'll probably wrap it up here pretty soon. But like, is it because not only is modernity receding and showing its cracks and showing Kingsnorth, Paul Kingsnorth? Thank you. That's who I'm thinking of. Lovely. See, that's distributed cognition. That's the hive mind. As modernity recedes, here's what I've noticed. I had a lot of modernity wrapped in my Christianity. And very little story, very little room for the mystery, very little room for, I got to figure it out. I came from kind of an apologetics background, which was great for me. I had a lot of Christians. I had a lot of questions going into Christianity, and my salvation was sort of a process. I mean, I really did try to sort through some stuff, and so apologetics was really key for me. And it's wonderful that we can ask those questions. But you're getting those answers from people who have it all figured out, and there's no mystery, and it's like, and I think as modernity recedes, I think a lot of the modernity that was wrapped in people's Christianity recedes, and you're realizing Paul Kingsnorth realizes, Martin Shaw realizes, who's the other, the Jordan Hall realized these people, and particularly Paul Kingsnorth, came out of a very mystic experience, I think. Oh, you know who else? What was it? Oh gosh, he's telling such a crazy story. Jordan Peterson interviewed him. I'm so bad with names, but he wrote the book, The Warning to the American Church, or something like that. It'll come to me once I'm done with this live stream. I'll put it in the notes. But he was talking about his real conversion to Christianity came because of a vision. Because he had a vision, a dream, a lucid dream or something like that. Where it's wild stuff. Eric Metaxas. There it is. So why is Joe Rogan interviewing Diana Walsh Pasulka? Why is Joe Rogan interviewing, why am I trying to come up with more names now that I've just figured out I can't remember names? Stephen C. Meyer. Why is he interviewing these people? I think as modernity sort of recedes, and as the modernity that had been sort of latched on to Christianity recedes, we're getting a picture of Christianity and the church and the Bible that is maybe more accurate. I've always thought that, right? This is G.K. Chesterton. He said every time Christianity seems like it dies, it's the heresies that have attached themselves to the church or to Christianity that has died. I think he uses the term Christendom. It's actually the heresies that die, which takes me back to Justin's post, right? It's these the things that don't have the ability to endure crumble, and what you're left with is the thing that is strong enough to endure. The thing that's strong enough to endure is the revelation that comes from the infinite mind of God, because truth is reality perceived by the mind of God, the most accurate message, the most true, good, and beautiful message that you can receive. And again, ultimately points you to the person of Christ, the embodied Word, the Word made flesh. And there's a reason every time Christianity seems like it dies. It's the heresy that dies off of Christianity, and what emerges is a more refined Christianity. I mean, isn't this the promise that God made, that He would refine His church, the bride of Christ is not beautiful. The bride of Christ is made beautiful by the bridegroom. That's what we're seeing, I think. Individually and divinely guided absolutely some preparation happening. I think you're right. Well, and I love that you point out the individually and maybe collectively, we might say, as we sort of collectively keep each other on this sort of path. That's Vervaeke. It's the Silk Road, right? We're sojourners, and really, in a way, the church, the body of Christ, is sort of an outpost for the kingdom on that path. You know, a rest hostel along the way. Maybe even, maybe we build rest hostels for people to come in and to abide and to rest and to be and to commune and to journey on. I think there's something to that. Individually, collectively, divinely inspired. I mean, again, I think that's the church. There's a whole nother episode of Joe Rogan where they were talking about the nature of community that I wish I had time to get through all these. I'm still working through the Diana Walsh Pasulka episode. That's a long gone. Everybody's talking about Aaron Rodgers, Cat Williams. There's all these other. It's like, fine, you guys can handle that stuff. And actually, it's been interesting. And I'll share some of these thoughts. Like, I didn't do a podcast this Monday. Usually I release a podcast on Monday and we can hang out Tuesday or Wednesday and do a little live stream and do a little recap of it. And I just didn't, because even though there's all this, of course, I'm a person who I dialogue with the dialogues that are going on in Joe Rogan's podcast, but also Jordan Peterson, Russel Brand, anybody else that I feel like is part of this great conversation that's going on. And I just had to rest. I mean, honestly, I just had to rest. I didn't make a podcast. I recovered some strength, some bandwidth, So, and I think that's important. So we'll see where this goes. I mean, there's a ton that I could make just off of Joe Rogan's recent conversations. I don't know if that's. I don't want my channel to turn into just like the sort of Joe Rogan fanboy channel. I want to create dialogues, and it just so happens that I tend to use the most, powerful. What would you call Joe Rogan's podcast? I mean, it's one of the most popular. I mean, it is a force. I mean, it's a phenomenon in and of itself. Millions of people. How many people subscribe to his YouTube channel. I think it's like 13 million. Now that I say that, I'm second guessing myself. So let's find out. So anyway, if you guys come up with anything, if you think it's worth, let's see if we can go to this. YouTube will kick me off here in a second once I do that. Okay, I'm not streaming it, I promise. Joe Rogan Experience, 16.2 million subscribers. Yeesh. And so what are you seeing? You're seeing the dialogos. You're seeing dialogue. You're seeing dialogue manifest in a way that it never has before. That's why I'm more interested in the phenomenon than I am. Well, the people are interesting too, though, aren't they? That's why the phenomenon is interesting. Joe Rogan is interesting. The people he interviews are interesting. Same with Jordan Peterson. And Russel Brand as well, though he gets very political. I mean, really anybody, like I said, that engages in this conversation. I'm interested in building this new form of dialogue with them. So, yeah, okay, there seems to be a bubbling over of the desire to connect with our Heavenly Father, even if we're not aware of how to convey that. Yeah. Connection. I think that's a good word. And that's where I go. I don't remember where it was. I could dig it out, but that was kind of my encouragement is, and Neil brought this up on the estuary. You know, are these people strengthening my faith? Yeah. Are these people strengthening my faith? Are these messages pointing me to the embodied Logos, the person of Christ? See Justin Brierley's on the cultural shift towards the belief in God. He's got the podcast. I guess maybe I'm getting tired. The surprising rebirth of belief in God. I haven't listened. I'll be completely honest. Again, I'm aware of the phenomenon. I've listened to maybe one episode, but I'm aware of it. I'm aware of the work that he's doing. I've also listened to some of his podcasts with Martin Shaw because those are beautiful. It's important to discern the messages that sound like the gospel, the good news. Again, I'm sort of bringing this from my Christian worldview because they're close, but if they fail to actually point to Jesus, that's where I want to encourage people. I've noticed something interesting in a recent Diana Pasulka interview. She was happy to talk about literally every paranormal religious phenomenon except one, exorcism. I found that interesting. And she's Catholic. And she studied, that's interesting because she did say that she studied ascent narratives, these from early church fathers and stuff like that. But that's interesting that she never really went into, because those are people that had visions and stuff like that, but never really went into the phenomenon of exorcism. Now, okay, maybe I'm not prepared probably to talk about this, but I was thinking about that as well, because I was thinking about how to frame this conversation. Is it in the realm of ideas? It is in the realm of spirits, fallen angels? What is it? It's a combination of all of those things. Is it in the material world? It certainly is, because I think the material world and the spiritual world are one world. And that's Ephesians 6. You look at that passage, it's saying that the spiritual battle is happening in both places. And then I thought about how often Jesus casts out demons. Why are demons looking for bodies? Why do demons want to embody people? What are we doing in our modern world with AI, cloning, all that stuff? Again, I'm not really prepared to talk about that, but it's something to be aware of. These people, and again, I would say all of this conversation to me points to the Spirit of God who indwells believers. You're full. If you're full of the Spirit of God, what does the Spirit of God do? Jesus says, it's better that I go, so I'll send the helper. He will lead you to all truth, right? But also, if you're full of the Spirit, you can't be filled up by anything else in this world that may want to. Yeah, there's something to that. Sorry that like I said, I am maybe not prepared to really talk about it, but why is that? Why do we see demon possession so frequently in the ministry of Jesus? Where is that? Is that 19? John 19? It's there. You guys can look it up. It's here towards the end. But there we go. That's where we are. That's why we're talking about Hermes. We're talking about Hermes because we need to be aware of the world of messages and mixed messages that we live in. We also need to be aware of the preparation for the gospel that needs to go in our own hearts and minds, that needs to go on collectively in our communities. And that preparation is important so that you can see the gospel, you can hear the gospel, and you will and it will become very obvious when something is anti-gospel, is not part of that revealed knowledge from the Creator, from God. So, man, I enjoy hanging out with you guys. That's where I kind of want to leave things. Unless you have a question, I know that I'm on a little bit of a delay. I don't know how to fix that. I need to fix that. And let me say this, and while I wrap up and while I wait for anybody to post another question, because I see that quite a few of you are still on. I would love to bring people onto these live streams. The way I have to do it is through Discord. I cannot, at least with my equipment right now, I cannot use StreamYard. I was thinking I would be able to use StreamYard in the future, and maybe if I get other equipment or something like that, I can. But right now, I'm on a delay. My camera is actually delayed when I log on to StreamYard. So the conversations that I've been having, and I'll post more of these conversations in the future. I'll get the conversation that I had with Lance out. It was a 3-hour conversation, so I'm working on it, Lance. It was lovely, and it was beautiful to talk with him. We talked about spiritual formation, spiritual practices, which I think is part of this conversation of preparation, of preparing the soul. But yeah, so in the future, if anybody wants to hop on, we need to connect on Discord, and then I'll bring you on a Discord. And I think that way there's not going to be a stream delay, or it's not really a stream delay. It's actually a camera delay that I have through StreamYard, but it's only through StreamYard because I have one of the cameras that StreamYard doesn't communicate with very clearly. So it is what it is. Maybe one of these days I'll grow up and get a real podcast. I'll have a podcast set up like Christian Baxter's. It'll be like stepping into the Matrix or something like that. So, all right. Well, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for being here. Love chatting. And, if you're catching this at the end, or if you're catching this after the live stream, hit me up with your comments because, again, I love to read those. And